Elif Shafak is concerned about the state of the world in these turbulent times. There's a lot at stake. The very future of democracy, human rights, and freedom of speech. So what can writers do?
I think it's a time in which writers need to speak up louder, bolder, about fundamental, universal values, because we cannot take these values for granted anymore. And for me, these values are democracy, pluralism, their women's rights, their LGBT rights, freedom of speech, rule of law.
She says in many parts of the world, writers have to fight for these universal rights. Until recently, few in Europe thought that was necessary.
Many writers coming from wobbly democracies or wounded democracies, such as Turkey, Pakistan, Venezuela, the Philippines, Egypt. You know, it's a long list. Many writers coming from these places never had the luxury of being apolitical. And I think more and more authors and colleagues in more stable democracies are also beginning to feel the kind of urgency, the need to respond that the authors from wobbly democracies have been feeling for a long time.
The daughter of a Turkish diplomat, Elif Shafak was born in Strasbourg and grew up in Madrid and Amman. She now lives in London. She's come to realize how one-sided many Europeans' view of the EU really is. She sees things from a different perspective.
For many of my friends in in the UK, in France, in Holland, in different parts of Europe, EU was mostly about a financial project. It was mostly about economy. It was mostly about trade deals. But coming from Turkey, for me, EU is not necessarily about primarily finance. For me, EU is about values, the values that I care about, and the values that I cannot take for granted. For me, it's also about history. It's also about memory. It's also about remembering how dangerous nationalism can be.
In many countries, nationalism is on the rise. In the US, Donald Trump came to power by pledging to put America first. In Europe, right-wing populists like Hungary's Viktor Orban and Poland's Jarosław Kaczynski have displayed a flagrant disregard for EU values. They prefer to sow mistrust and put up fences. Turkey serves as a warning of where such isolationism and illiberalism can lead.
We're at a crossroads in Europe, in America, obviously, but in other parts of the world. We need to bear in mind that, unfortunately, what happened in Turkey, the decline of democracy, the decline of freedom of speech, it can happen in other parts of the world as well. We have seen signs of this in Hungary, in Poland, in the Philippines, in different parts of the world. So there are patterns. We now know that democracy is more fragile than we thought.
What's to be done? Shafak thinks the answers lie less with politicians like Angela Merkel and more with civil society. She's calling on Europeans to stand up, speak out, and show support for Turks fighting to save their democracy.
We need active citizens who put pressure on European leaders to talk about human rights situations in Turkey, the decline of democracy in Turkey, the decline of freedom of speech in Turkey. As we are speaking right now, Turkey became the world's biggest jailer for journalists, surpassing even China's sad record. As we're speaking, there are people who have lost their jobs, thousands of academics, many of them only because they signed a peace petition. And these people have no chance of finding another job elsewhere. It is a long, long list. So I think we need to focus on the civil society.
Elif Shafak is convinced that only a strong civil society can keep autocrats and right-wing populists in check. And she'll keep working to achieve that.